Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Crown Zenith, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we have a late night results rollover because I didn't do it last week. We were too busy with news, which means we have 4 tournaments to look over in the online format. Might give us some inspiration for decks going into the next few tournaments in Crown Zenith. So let's start off with the late night 77. And we actually have a very interesting Arceus Tapu Koko deck with a 9-1-1 record. Pretty interesting combination of Flying Pikachu, as we know, always going to be a headache for Lost Zone players, especially with the Parasols, and also going to be very frustrating for Regis. But also we have the Tapu Koko VMAX in here. Don't forget the regular V also has free retreat, so all of your Pokemon are good leads in theory. And we have not only type coverage on Lugia, but also the paralysis option as well for when we are behind. This has been a bit of a deck in Japan in bits and bobs. But never really has converted over, at least in IRL tournaments. So it would be interesting to see if this one has the legs. It's playing the like Sinnohs, the Parasols to try and defend against Yveltal, even though you're using like VMAX Pokemon. You have that type coverage, you have paralysis, and you still have path plays that you can go for early. It's not playing any like draw engine Pokemon, just like shoes, gears, and a high support account. But we've seen that do well with like Arctura and other things like that. So this deck is still trying to create that awkward prize map. So a pretty interesting one there. It wouldn't surprise me if that is kind of like better than the random mishmashes of Arceus that we've seen nab points in a handful of tournaments. So it feels like it's much more streamlined and simplistic. We see our first Lugia. We've been over this so many times. I'll say if we see something interesting in Lugia, but most of the time we're within 58 cards of each other. We have a Judge Path Mew. Pretty similar story here. Collapsed is an interesting inclusion, but we've seen it a handful of times as well. Also choosing to play the Echoing Horn. But again, these are all things we're starting to rinse and repeat a lot. And because we have 4 to look over today, 4 tournaments, I'm going to be streamlining it and speeding up. We see Vikavolt doing well this time with the Aerodactyl. But nothing too outlandish here. Ditto creeping back into the list. I think that's when you're not seeing the Aerodactyl build, you'll typically see just double Raikou, double Vikavolt these days, but Ditto still can chip in at times. It's just a slightly worse lead for you, I think, compared to just having a second Raikou. I would see a Regis in here as well. This looks very similar to Rahul's Successful 60. It's playing that Cape one of. It's only playing 2 Path, though. That's interesting. Typically, we play 4 Path in Regis. And I still feel Path is just like monstrous for giving yourself percentages into Lugia and Mew. That it feels valuable to still be at that 4 count, but we sort of gained a consistency spot in Pokestop and Capture compared to like Rahul 60. Also playing Vacuum, which is kind of a weird one. This feels like one of the lowest value sort of like answer cards. Like Rope is still in here to help against Flying Pikachu and Ice Cube. Whereas the Vacuum is like, sure, you can get rid of Parasol so you can Blizzard Bind. Not sure what else you need to Vacuum against too much. We have some more Mew. A DTE Judge Path Mew. Once again, very simple, not even playing Oricorio. I think Oricorio is still really good for Rayquaza, so I would definitely play it. We see another Mew, this time with the Aerodactyl 1-1. I think most people are probably better served going for the New Age Infestation package for Lugia. Just personally, I think it's way less intrusive in the deck because it's at least a Fusion Strike Pokemon that can be put on the board, and it's a 1-prize Pokemon that can be thrown into the active position. It's just people need to learn the Infestation like late game lock that you're going to try and establish against Lugia once they've burnt Birdkeeper or played Pump into like onto the board, that sort of thing. We have an Arctura doing pretty well. This is the heavy gear build with Lost Cities and also a Temple. Temple's a strange one because you're actually a little bit scared of things like Goodra templing against you, but I suppose you're against Goodra going to have access to Starbirth to at least bounce it anyway. So just another form of defense, so you can try and develop Parasol and Sinnoh to allow Dura to tank. I'm also a big fan of the Choice Belt inclusion to make things more awkward for the controlling players. This is actually Nico. playing it, so pretty solid player piloting it. We have the next event, this time won by Lugia. And again, it's looking pretty standard. Nothing untoward there. We have a Gudra in second place. And this looks, again, pretty straightforward. The choice belt is becoming more and more common in these lists, and I think it's correct. Just the 2 temples, that's very low on respect for Lugia. Really light. There's just no respect. Where's the respect? You gotta respect your Lugias, folks. Come on. We see another Lugia doing well. Nothing too untoward. It is playing Echoing Horn, which is an interesting one. Really leaning heavily into the Irida package with 4 different one-ofs. The rope as well coming in. I do like the rope idea. Like, it's kind of close with Birdkeeper, because Birdkeeper's another draw card, but there's more power behind the rope, you know what I mean? We see another Arc, Coco. I wonder if this player saw the success of the late night going on earlier and decided to copy pasta, but it seems to have done well. That's cool to see. See another Reggie's. And again, this is looking pretty straightforward. This is actually Rahul's 60, right? Because it plays the 1 capture, 1 cape. Yeah, this looks like it's Rahul's successful list over the last couple of weeks. More Lugia. This time we're seeing the Cologne. It's been a while since Cologne's come back in. I don't know if it's in or out of vogue, because Eternatus players may force you to put Cologne back in the deck, but Cologne isn't like the most highest performing card in the Lugia, so I don't think it's like... I don't think many people will look to bring it back in. Seeing more Reggies, some Pokestops being weaved into this one as well, with the double capture. I do respect just trying to give yourself an extra push. I think it's reasonable. But yeah, I definitely like at least 3 path. And at least... Like, you want to play at least 4 stadiums total. So this is a nice way of splitting it up. Honestly, looks like a pretty reasonable list of the Reggies. And then we see Control. It's been a while since we've seen some Control doing well. This is the Azul-style Control build, where it's, instead of playing Speed and Flying Pikachu Parasol, it's playing Ice Cube Wash as your block face combo into Lost Zone players and against Reggies. Has the Lost City, so that once a threat is dealt with, it's dealt with for good, which is kind of cool. You've got the Thorntons coming in here to allow you to weave in that Ice Cube and even just like thump more times with Snorlax and a few things like that. This deck is still very solid into Lugia's and pretty solid into Mew. I actually think this is like an underplayed deck. I don't know if it's just an online thing, but yeah, I really do think Control is like still pretty good, and it feels like Lost Zone players are still choosing to just tech for other things that aren't Control. Every now and then you'll see the odd Temple, but they're really not heavily teched at all. And like Temple doesn't just beat Ice Cube anyway if you're playing like capes and stuff on your Ice Cube, so they, you know, Sableye doesn't even knock you out in a turn. So yeah, an interesting one that Control isn't more popular actually for how strong it is in a vacuum. We then move on to this week's late night, so just yesterday. It looks like it was a Mew Finals with a 902 record with an Aerodactyl Mew. So Aerodactyl's still being played over the Infestation. I don't know if it's just a harder grasp to do the Infestation combo, or that you're worried about just them still having Birdkeeper, or people being more aware of it, making it less effective, but I still feel Aerodactyl is on the weaker side. We see a more streamlined Mew in second place, not having that same respect for Lugia, but still doing very well. We see a Vikavolt Palkia. We haven't seen this for a while. Obviously, this has won a regional in, I think it is the Crown Zenith format. It may have just been the Silver Tempest format. But it's been a while since we've seen this. The Mewtwo Greninja engine is just so strong, especially with Speed Lightning and Melanie, like all adding to your hand composition. It's still a solid deck, and this time it's weaved in the Skyseal Stone. Bit of a strange one, because you do lean into Star Portal in a lot of matchups, but possibly rationing your way to a Skyseal Stone. It feels especially strange when you're not playing Drapion to play Skyseal Stone. That feels like a strange choice to me. This is actually, I believe this is the player who won the regional. with Palkia Vikavolt. So they're out here testing the waters. We see a Gudra deck, this time with a couple more Sinnohs, but more of the same, really. As things we've seen previously, looking pretty good. Another Goo here. Again, very straightforward, streamlined. This is weaving in a Parasol and a Sinnoh. So basically, Gudra is how much do you want to respect Lugia? How many Sinnohs versus Parasols, or if both, that sort of thing. Even more Mew. This was a really good Mew event by the looks of things. This one is playing the 3-stadium split, which I can get behind. I do like the value of Collapsed against Lost Zone players. Still a very high vacuum count. Looking pretty solid here. And we end on a Lugia still doing pretty well. This is a Flying Peak Lugia. It's been a while since we've seen one of these. But yeah, still seems to be getting the value done. Like, Flying Pikachu is still a strong card in the game. It covers like just enough. And Reggie's can be a pretty awkward matchup for you. I think part of the reason why Reggie's is awkward is because they play Path, and having no Path bounce other than Pumpkin makes me a little bit nervous. But I suppose as long as you can you can slow attach to a Pikachu, I suppose. You have 2 DTEs and 5 effective lightning energies. So you can go about it that way as well. We will end on Arc Gudra then for this tournament. And wow, we're seeing the Aegislash. This is like a throwback list. Remember Arc Goo? And it has Aegislash for Sonic Edge to get through awkward things, and then Max Hack for that higher damage output. Been a while since we've seen this in action. Has the Radiant Guardian as well. Pretty interesting combination. Has 1 Path. It's very high on healing with the triple Hyper, triple Cave. It's surprising to me that we're not seeing any... one big Parasol, I suppose. I was thinking, like, not enough defense. It feels like you should probably be playing 2 of this, right? Especially because there will be games when you don't get to Starbirth, and you're just going to sit behind a Parasol Goo, and then you want to Moisture Star as well. Because, like, if you Trinity Charge into Lugia or into, like, Mew, it's going down before you get to Starbirth, right? And you want to double Goo the rest of the game out. It's cool that you have higher damage output potential from Aegislash, though. It's been something I liked in my Arc Goo when it was a thing earlier on in this life. So yeah, that rounds out the Late Night 79. Let's have a look at the metagame, because these are the most recent 2. Lugia is actually super underplayed. Less than 20%. That's so bizarre that almost 20% is underplayed for how strong the deck is, but there you go. A Lost Zone box is being split up, but that's above Mew in popularity still. It just didn't convert very well. Gudra, Regis, Dura all being relatively popular. Vikavolt as well. Yeah, it's a good representation of what we're expecting. Not many people are believers in Eternatus still, despite its most recent placement. So that's an interesting one. We will end then with the Late Night 80, and it's once again Lugia on top. And once again, no thrills with the list. We have the Gudra doing pretty well. Nothing too surprising here. We have more Lugias. Again, it's all very standard stuff at this stage. This is a Flying Peak. With Roxanne, interestingly, creeping into Lugia. I think Roxanne is good with the Flying Peak package, to be fair. I think that does make a good amount of sense. This feels like again, pretty interesting, like a straightforward list. Feels like Speed Lightning is creeping into a good amount of these 60s at this point. We see another Arcdura. More of the same, honestly. What can you say about a format that's already gone on for like 2 months? It's like we haven't seen much new, surprising, shocking, stunning stuff. It's funny that this plays effectively 3 V-Star powers, and you just cherry pick between them. But there you go. We're seeing... I still feel like Path is stronger than the Aerodactyl in Vikavolt as well. Another Judge Path, Mew. And we end on Arc Peak with a Vulpix. Hello. Glad you stayed around to see this, huh? Well, Drapion and Silvery Snow Star is a very effective way at beating Mew, and Snow Mirage is still sometimes annoying for some decks, like Goodra, I suppose. And Goodra would be a difficult matchup for this Arc Flying Peak otherwise, so... I think we've seen this once or twice before in online tournaments, just hasn't really converted over. I'm also definitely a bad friend, because I promised someone that I was going to look at their deck list. So we're going to go back to one of the previous late nights so we can show off a deck list. Fortunately, it's one that we haven't seen yet. And I'm not finding this very quickly at all. Let me do this. Because someone's been waiting for this video for a couple of weeks, and I've delayed it long enough. I'm doing this in the least efficient way possible, but it's also because I'm trying to talk and think at the same time, and that's just like way too difficult for me. I believe it's this one. Yeah, okay. So we actually haven't seen any Lost Box today at all, really, have we? So seeing the Rayquaza doing well, pretty cool to see. This looks like a very straightforward 60, honestly. The Glaran Zapdos is an interesting inclusion to help out against Arc players, I suppose. And Vikavolt. Vikavolt is one of the trickier matchups, and this is definitely like flip-flops the matchup. I feel like there's other ways you could do that anyway, like playing Miltank and stuff. Like playing Miltank is a much harder answer to Vikavolt. And it can also be a weird stalematey situation against Flying Peak, so I think that could be stronger than the Zap. But this has upside into like Arc Dura and such, so there might be some value towards just booting people with a Zapdos. Also, if you're respecting Eternatus, which, you know, maybe some people are now that it's done well. So yeah, cool to get an extra bit of Lost Box in there, because we haven't seen much of it, and I know Arctic has been leaving lots of comments for the algorithm, which you love to see, and you have to reward that sort of behaviour. So yeah, that wraps up the late night results over the last 4 tournaments. Honestly, if you haven't noticed by now, even I'm getting bored. Like we're seeing 3 or 4 card differences in most of these deck lists. I was most intrigued by the Arc Flying Peak Coco doing well. I think that maybe has some legs. If anyone's got some free time and still want to commit time to the format, I think that has some intrigue. But I haven't really thought it through enough. We didn't really see much Lost Box conversion at all. It feels like one of the decks that does better in the hands of like strong pilots IRL. But also it might just be that it's one of the harder decks to play, and it's a reflection of that as well in the game. So I'll hear your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll be back with another one soon. Cheers.